Okay, to factor by grouping. Well, factoring by grouping, in general, this is a technique where we typically only see when there are 4 terms. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 terms here. And it's not really always possible, it's not possible to tell that we're going to be able to succeed factoring by grouping. But how factoring by grouping works is we're going to group the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together. And we're going to factor the greatest common factor out of each of these groups. So 3x minus 3y here, my greatest common factor is 3. And when I factor that out, I'm left with x minus y. And I close my parentheses because that's the end of that. And then I have plus, because that's the plus between the 3x minus 3y and the ax minus ay. I'm going to again factor out the greatest common factor of these two, except now looks like my greatest common factor is a. I'm left with x minus y. So in the first step here, I factored out a 3 from the first 2 terms and an a from the last 2 terms. And in doing so, I actually now can see that there's an x minus y that's in common between these, because now I essentially only have 2 terms. There's that term and that term. And they both have an x minus y as their common factor. So I will factor that out. I'll leave my parentheses open for what's left over from each of these. From the first term, there's a 3 left over. And from the second term, there is an a left over. So we actually end up factoring this as x minus y times 3 plus a. Again, you can check your work here to make sure we didn't make any mistakes by distributing this back out. X minus y times 3 plus a. If I distribute this out, x times 3 is 3x. X times a is ax. The opposite of y times 3 is negative 3y. The opposite of y times a is negative ay. This is not in the same order. There's supposed to be a y there. It's not in the same order as what was up here, but that's not really a problem. I can rearrange these things if I want, just by attaching the negative. I get 3x minus 3y plus ax minus ay. So you can see they are the same thing. That one and that one are the same as each other. So my factored form here, I am confident that it is correct. All right, let's do factoring by grouping on this one. Those are my 2 terms. This term right here, since there's that subtraction, I'm going to put that term, I'm going to actually attach it there. I'm going to say this is plus a negative 4bx, just to make sure I don't miss the fact that there was a negative there. Alright, so I have 5x minus 5y, that's greatest common factor there is 5, and I'm left with x minus y. Now, between these, my leading term has a negative factor, a negative coefficient. So that means I'm going to attach it as part of this, as some of the stuff I'm factoring out, just like I did when I'm factoring the greatest common factor, because that's exactly what I am doing. So I'm factoring out a negative. They both have a 4 and they both have a b. So when I factor out the negative 4b, I'm left with an x on the first term, and 4 divided by negative 4 is negative 1. The b is factored out, and we get a y. It's kind of silly to write negative 1b, negative 1y, so I'm just going to write x minus y there. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave that in and do it like this. Because, you're probably not wanting to erase stuff in your work. Alright, so you can see now there is a x minus y that's in common between these. Like I said, it's not always guaranteed that factoring by grouping will work. But when it does work, it's kind of, I don't know, it seems kind of cool. It seems kind of weird, actually. It almost feels like we're folding something in on itself twice. But in any case, we get factoring, we do this. Let's check our work here because this is a little bit of a weird process. X minus y times 5 minus yb. So I'll distribute. That's a 4. It would help if I could read my own handwriting. Alright, so we'll distribute the x here, giving us 5x. Distribute there, giving us negative 4xb. Distribute the opposite of y, giving us minus 5y. And distribute the opposite of y here, giving us plus, because it's a negative and a negative, 4by. And it looks like we have the 5x, that's this term right here. We have the negative 5y, that's this term right here. We have the negative 4bx, that's this term right here. And we have the 4by, which is this term right here. So this, I am confident, is actually the factored form.